Hello everybody! Welcome to a new series that I call the Feature Match. In this series, we look at exciting new standard brews, as well as decks that I really feel have the potential to break out. In this first episode, we're going to be looking at Red Deck wins for the spring of 2023. Now, many of you are thinking, how could Red Deck wins be an exciting new brew, or a deck that is poised to break out, when Red Deck wins has been a staple in every format since Magic began? Well, let me tell you that in a world that is nearly 50% Shield Red or Fable the Mirrorbreaker decks, Red Deck wins has yet to coalesce around what is the perfect deck for the meta. This means that every creator, every player, every brewer has a different idea and a different interpretation of what are the best cards. And especially since Magic's standard format won't be rotating for another 18 months, there's a lot of chance for an increasing build series within this format. So let's take a look at what I feel is one of the best Red Deck wins. This deck is something I've been playing with for the last month or so. It has really come together for me. It's done very well for me. And I believe that this is a pretty good representation of what the deck could be. This deck is also fairly cheap. It comes in around $78 to $79 if you're building it in paper, about $33 if you're building it on MTGO. This deck does have some rares and mythics in it, so it is not necessarily a budget deck for Arena, knowing that the Arena economy isn't the most great in terms of cost. If you want a deck that has 0 rares or mythics or is more Arena friendly in terms of economy, Saffron Olive and the MTGGoldfish has done several Red Deck wins that are budget or 0 rares and mythics that I would recommend you check out. That series that he has done is just absolutely fantastic. But this is the deck that I'm working with. This is what works in my meta. This is what works for the decks that I play online. Your mileage may vary. Feel free to tweak this deck, add things in for your own spice and flavor. But this is the deck that works for me, so let's take a look. Now, we've got this deck sorted into categories based upon the CMC. You'll see that most of our CMC cards are sitting around 1 to 2, with, I believe, the average cost is about 2. This deck is running 15 instants and sorceries, 4 enchantments, and 2 planeswalkers. So it is a little bit leaning on the spell side, but not so much. It's running 19 creatures, so it's not quite the 20 to 22 that you would expect in a standard Red Deck wins. So really this deck is kind of more Red Deck mid-range than it would be considered Red Deck wins. But you know, it's just a name, it's just a classification. Really, as long as the deck works, that's all that we care about. So let's take a look at the 1-drops. First, we're going to cover the creatures followed by spells. So the first card that we've got here is Kumeno. It's a saga. I think it's one of the best sagas. It's one of the cheapest sagas. It's 1 red, and it does everything that you could possibly need. It is a Swiss Army knife for red. The first chapter allows you to ping your opponent for 1 when it comes into the battlefield. I like extra damage spells. You'll notice that a lot of the creatures have the ability to do something like this within the deck. It's free damage. It allows you to get in and a little closer to the win, and especially with Red Deck wins, you don't want to give them a chance to come back. You want to seal the game up early. I especially like sealing the games up early. You know, being able to take a break in between rounds is really nice, so getting in that extra point of damage does matter. The second chapter of this saga, it really works with some of the low drop creatures, the 1 and 2 drops, when we're going to cover some of my favorites in just a bit. The second chapter puts a +1/+1 counter on any of your creatures that you play after it ticks up to chapter 2, and it's the first creature, I should mention. So if you're playing maybe a Monastery Swiftspear or maybe a Bloodthirsty Adversary, it gives it the pump. This is especially nice with Monastery Swiftspear. It goes up to a 2/3, which we're going to talk about is great, especially with Prowess. But yeah, you always want to see the pump. Usually, I will play this on turn 1 if I've got it in my opening hand, so that I can play a creature on turn 2, maybe a 1-drop or a 2-drop if I've got it or I draw into it. So it's really nice. The third chapter is an army in a can. It puts a 2/2 hasty human shaman onto the battlefield. So essentially, you're getting a weakened version of Goblin Guide right out of the bat on turn 3. No matter whether this is early in the game or late in the game, you really like to see it. Early in the game, it's more damage on the board. Late in the game, it's still more damage on the board, but at the very least, it's a blocker that can take a hit and allow you to stay alive for a little bit longer until you draw that finisher card that you need. So really great, 1 mana. You want to see this in your opening hand. This is always desirable. The next creature is probably one of my favorites. It is Monastery Swiftspear. What I would say is probably the 3rd best 1-drop red creature in Magic, following Regavan and Goblin Guide. It's got haste, so on turn 1, if that's all you've got, you're still hitting in for 1. It's got prowess, so every spell that you cast that's red outside of creatures is going to pump it up for a turn, which allows you to get in more damage or to survive a burn spell or to survive combat. It's absolutely great. This is early game, late game. It's always desirable because of the prowess mechanic. Next, we move on to Voldaren Epicure. Voldaren Epicure, it's only a 1/1 for 1, so at the very least, it's a body that can throw itself in front of a really large bus. And it blocks very well is what I'm trying to say. But its real strength comes in the fact that when it enters the battlefield, it does a point of damage to your opponent. So again, it's that whole philosophy of we got to deal damage, we got to close this game out. The second is the blood token. The blood token allows you to really filter some of the dead cards in your hand. If it's late in the game and you've got a handful of cards that either you can't cast because you need another land, or you've got a bunch of lands that you need something to cast, you could throw away a card that you don't need and pull up a card that you do need or have a chance to. It allows you to dig. It's something that red really is craving in the color pie, so this allows you to get around that. So Voldaren Epicure, another wonderful card, and it does get bolstered a little bit if you can get the 2nd chapter off of Kumeno. The final 1-drop card that we're running is Shivan Devastator. This is a new addition to the deck that I'm playing. I think it's an undervalued card. It's a greatly undervalued card, actually, in the standard format. It's a red X spell, so you can dump extra mana into it. So if you're playing it on turn 6 or 7 or 8, and you've got 5 or 6 or 7 mana sitting around, and you've maybe even you flooded out and you're running 7 or 8 or 9 mana on the field, it allows you to use that mana and use it efficiently. It's got flying and it's got haste, so it goes over the top of a gummed up board if you're just staring down a wall of creatures. It has haste, so it can come in. It can attack the first turn you play it. And since it's red and X, if you've got 5 mana, it's a 4/4. If you've got 7 mana, it's a 6/6. And in a lot of those late game scenarios, it really does allow you to close out. Sometimes you just need the extra 4 or 5 points of damage because you can't get through, and this allows you to get it. And again, especially with Kumeno, it allows you to pump it, so it's an all-around good card. I think it is, again, very undervalued. In the spell slot, we've got Play with Fire, which is shock on steroids. It's a 2 damage spell for 1 red mana, which is pretty par for the course in standard. But the ability to scry if you target your opponent allows you to filter your top deck and potentially get the card that you need. So I can see this having some effect in older formats. Now we move on to the 2-drop slot, which has a lot of really cool creatures, a lot that I'm really excited to see how they fare in older formats. I know I will be playing some. So the first is Bloodthirsty Advocate. This essentially has a similar ability to a couple cards. It's a 2/2 for 2, so its stats are on par with other 2/2s, especially that it has haste, so it's kind of earned its mythic status in that way. It's really efficient. But it also has kind of this weird kind of flashbacky thing that's going on, maybe this weird Snapcaster thing, or the red 1-drop that allows you to play your opponent's instants or sorceries out of their graveyard when it hits. I can't remember the name of that card, but it's there. So what this card is it has a multi-kicker of 3. And when you pay that, it allows you to cast an instant or sorcery out of your graveyard that has CMC 3 or less. And that is really important because a lot of your really cool burn spells are CMC 3 or less. So it allows you to pick one of those cards and just throw it at your opponent again. It allows you to play card draw again. It allows you to play, some of your other spells that you've got in the deck and some in the sideboard that we can bring in. Again, it's multi-kicker, so it's a mana sink. So if you've got 5 mana, it allows you to kick it to kick it once. If you've got 8, kick it twice. If you're sitting on 11, it allows you to kick it 3 times. And if you can throw 3 burn spells at your opponent that they weren't expecting, all the better. It helps trigger prowess. It's an all-around good card. Next, we move on to the Kessig Flame Breather. This card, I've been toying around with the numbers between 4 and 1. I think 2 is the correct number for my deck. It's a really good card, doesn't have haste. It's a 1/3 for 2, so it can block decently well. Its real ability comes in the ability to ping your opponent every time you cast an instant or sorcery or red spell, actually. That's not a creature. So you play a Planeswalker, you play your Saga, you play your Lightning Strike, it pings for 1. I sometimes, especially if I'm just going off with this deck, I can do 3 or 4 damage with this card just on its ability to ping your opponent. So really good, and again, blocks well. We've got the Kiran Spell Spear, which is probably one of my favorite cards. First, having Trample and Prowess is just an amazing combo. Yeah, we don't have haste, but the fact that it's got Prowess means that it's going to be bulking up as the game goes on when you cast your instants and sorceries and other red spells. And Trample means that you're going to be able to just run over those smaller creatures and get in for that extra little bit of damage. It's a 2/2 for 2, so 2 is pretty good. Its real ability lies in the ability to flip it. So for 3 and a Phyrexian mana, or a blue mana, we're not running blue, so we always pay Phyrexian mana. In this deck, either we're winning really cleanly or we're not. So to be honest, the last point of life is the most important. So if I've got 3 life and I need to flip it, I'm going to go to 1. But when it flips, it turns to a 4/4 with Prowess, Trample, and Ward 2, which is all the things that you want. Keeping the Prowess and Trample is really important. Being 4/4 is incredibly important. And having Ward 2 makes it a magnet for removal because it's so good, but it makes them pay for it. So at the very least, by having this on the board, it's a creature they have to respond to. So maybe you'll draw out that creature kill spell and be able to kind of feint and bait them along. But also very good card. Finally, we run up. That is the end of the creatures, actually, for the 2-drop. Let's talk about the spells. Lightning Strike, pretty par for the course in Standard. Whether it be, Flame Javelin or Lightning Strike, this is kind of the burn spell that we get. We're never going to get Lightning Bolt in Standard again. That is my honest prediction. So Lightning Strike is what we get, and it's pretty good at what it does. Reckless Impulse is one of the best ways to draw cards in red in Standard. It's a sorcery speed for 2 that exiles the top 2 cards of your library, and until the end of your next turn, you can play them. This includes lands, so if you're short on lands, it allows you to potentially dig for those. So if you think about it like this, that you play this, rip 2 off the top and put them into exile, at the draw for your next turn, you draw a card. So essentially you've dug 3 cards deep and you're seeing 3 cards. So one way that you could look at this is potentially a 2-mana red Brainstorm. Kind of, maybe. Either way, it's still a good card draw spell, especially when you're going to be running a little low on cards, and it triggers Prowess. Looking at the 3-drops, let's go ahead and take a look at, we've got Rending Flame, which is actually like let's start with creatures. So Squee. Squee is a legendary, so we only run 1 of them because I don't want to flood out with them. It's 3-drop, which is really good. It's a 2/2, which is, it's okay. It's got haste, which makes up for it. And its ability to bring a goblin friend with it when it attacks is where the value lies. The goblin doesn't go away at the end of turn, so as long as it keeps attacking, you keep getting extra goblins, so, it multiplies. Squee is also immortal, as we know through lore. Squee can't die. So for 3 and exiling 4 cards out of your graveyard, you can bring it back. So this demands that they have some sort of exile effect, whether it be a Flame Blast Bolt or one of the other exiling cards. They need it because Squee's going to keep coming back. And in a red deck wins deck like this, you're going to constantly have cards in the graveyard to feed to Squee. So this is a really good card. It just builds on what you've got going. You're happy to see it in your opening hand. You're happy to draw it late because it gives you something to throw at your opponent. Finally, we've got Chandra, Dress to Kill. I think this is one of the best Chandras out there. Not to get into a fight with the Torch of Defiance fans. I love Torch of Defiance. But I think this one is just as good, if not maybe a little better. Chandra's +1 allows you to not only add a red mana to your pool, but also allows you to ping your opponent. So damage plus mana allowing you to then maybe play another 1-drop of the spell that you've got, or maybe a burn spell that you've got. So it's essentially ramp for red, which is really nice. Chandra's other +1 allows you to dig a card. This is really great, especially if you're empty-handed, or if you just need that perfect burn spell to close out the game, or maybe that creature, maybe you're trying to find your Shivan Devastator in your deck. One thing to note is that it does not allow you to play lands, so I have made that mistake on a couple times. I forgot that Chandra does not allow you to play lands, so I've watched the lands slip into the black, darkness, and void. Don't be me. Don't feel like you've just made a horrible mistake when you do that. Chandra's ultimate, allowing you to deal damage whenever you play a red spell, is really, really nice. I've ultimated Chandra many times before, probably more than almost any other Planeswalker. I think I'm up to 5 now. And it's really nice to do it. It gives you that feeling like you're invincible. But I think that that's kind of the problem. Like, you shouldn't be looking to ultimate this Chandra or really any Planeswalker, because Planeswalker ultimates tend to be win more conditions. Like, if you can ultimate Chandra, you're probably already winning that match. Most Planeswalkers don't allow you to kind of just flip the game. Again, if you ultimate a Planeswalker, you're probably already winning. But Chandra's really nice. Other Planeswalkers, as we'll talk in our budget build part of this segment, easily could be replaced with Jai, but we'll talk about that. In our 4-drop slot, we have Thundering Raiju. This card is really all that I want to be doing at 4 mana. So it's a 3/3 for 4 with haste, which is, again, really nice for 4. And it's got the ability that when you attack with it, it puts a +1/+1 counter on something. So it allows you to pump up another creature. You could even put it on Thundering Raiju. Although, unless you need to, I would stress putting it on a different creature. Because before damage is dealt, Thundering Raiju will then deal damage to your opponent equal to the number of modified creatures that you have. So this includes things like equipment, enchantments, and counters. So this works really well with Kumeno. But if you put this on the counter on a Voldaren Epicure, or the Goblin created by Kumeno, or on any other creature that you're running, it'll deal damage. So if you've got 2 or 3 modified creatures on the field, it's doing 3 damage, so you're getting a lightning bolt. So that is really nice in terms of being able to help burn out your opponent. Plus, then you crash in for 3, maybe 4 if you put the counter on Raiju. Again, note that it doesn't feed off of the counter that you put on itself, but it's really nice to do that. In terms of the spells at this, we've got Stoke the Flame. Stoke the Flame is really nice as a burn spell. You could also call it Convoke the Flame, because it's got Convoke. When you've got a board full of small creatures and you just need to burn your opponent for a couple more points of damage, just tap them and pay this. This is really tricky, especially if you've got no open mana. You can feint that you're defenseless, and then all of a sudden you burn your opponent. This is really good. It's 4, so it's really good at dealing with things like Fleetfoot Daredevil, or other smaller creatures. It won't deal with Shield Red. What deals with Shield Red is the Rending Flame, which is a card I forgot to talk about in the 3-drop slot, so let's talk about it here. This is a really nice burn spell insofar as it deals 5 damage. So one of the biggest cards running around Standard right now is going to be Shield Rid, and Shield Rid is a pain. Gaining your opponent's life and draining you for life. Fairly soon, it's going to end you. So you need some way to get rid of it, and since it's 5 power and 5 toughness, you need something that can be fairly efficient. So again, Stoke the Flame doesn't do it. You don't want to 2-for-1 yourself by playing, multiple Lightning Strikes or multiple Play with Fire. So, Rending Flame does it, then does it really well. The mana base, really simple. It is 20 mountains. Now, you could go 19. I find that you're generally lacking mana. You could go as high as 22. It kind of depends on your luck of draw. For me, 20 is about what I need. So this deck has, again, a lot of really cool synergies. Playing the Fire Breather, turns your plays with fires into lightning bolts. It turns your Stoke the Flames into rending flames really fast. So it has a lot of synergy. Kumeno kind of works with all of your creatures, no matter what their cost in terms of CMC. Chandra helps you dig. Reckless Impulse helps you dig, triggers prowess. So this deck has a lot of really tight synergy. Now, let's look at the sideboard, because the sideboard really is, first, I'll just openly admit, it's one of my weaker areas of building. But with red deck wins, you either burn your opponent or you burn your opponent more. So it's kind of what flavor of burn do you want to pull out. So first, for creature-based decks, we've got 3 Strangles. Those are probably one of the better creature removal spells, dealing 3. It deals with a lot of the tokens and knights that come out. Calling the Professionals is a lifesaver against life gain decks. There's a lot of life gain running around, either incidental or tied to really good creatures. So being able to shut that down for a turn really can blow out your opponent. Plus, you deal 3 damage to something, so you can remove a creature that is being pesky that is in your way, or you can deal it straight to your opponent. So really like Calling a Professional. It also fits nicely into the 3-drop slot. We've got Invasion of Regatha. This is essentially a 3-mana Stoke with Flames that you can't convoke. The creature on the backside is nice, being able to flip it. It's got 5, damage or loyalty or life, I guess. When you flip it, it turns into a Prowess 4/4, which is excellent in terms of being 3 mana and just being able to tack it down. But the real advantage comes with its front side, being able to deal 4 damage to your opponent and 1 damage to a creature. That can't be beat. So you play that on 3, and you're doing a Convoke with Flame to Convoke the Flame, Stoke with Flame to your opponent. So it's really nice. We run a couple of those. This is a case where you just might need a couple more creatures on the battlefield, or you just need a couple really efficient burn spells. And it keeps your opponents guessing, like, which are you going to attack? We have Brotherhood's End. This card I can see being really popular in a lot of formats. Maybe not main board, but definitely sideboard depending on meta. So for 3 mana, you either A, get to deal 3 damage to your the board, which in red is the closest we're going to get to a board wipe, or you're going to be able to get rid of all CMC 3 or less artifacts, which gets rid of a lot of vehicles that are running around Standard. And what I'm most excited for is in my modern build for my burn deck and for my Izzet Murktide deck, I'm looking forward to this as a hoser for affinity. So love this card. It is probably one of the more expensive cards in the deck. It's right behind Chandra and Shivan Devastator in terms of cost per card. But you know what? I think it's worth every penny. Next, we have one more copy of Stoke the Flames, because it's just a good burn spell, especially if you find yourself being creature heavy and they're creature light. It's really nice to be able to have one more burn spell. Also, we've got the Elder Dragon Wars as a saga. This is a read-ahead saga, so it allows you to pick the chapter that best suits your needs. So chapter 1, it deals 2 damage to everything on the board, so it's kind of like a Brotherhood End. You can play this if they have a lot of smaller creatures that you don't necessarily need the big body on Brotherhood End. Next, you get to the second chapter, which allows you to pitch cards and then draw that many, so it helps, again, filter your draws and filter your hand. And the third chapter creates a 4/4 flying dragon. Now, this dragon doesn't have haste, so it can't attack the same turn that it comes in, but it gives you a threat for the next turn, or it gives you a blocker if that's what you need. It's read ahead, so you can start at any chapter that you want. It's 4 mana, so it's a little bit higher on the curve, but especially if you're starting at chapter 1, because that's what you need, and everything else is just incidental bonus after that, it's well worth the cost. We run a couple of these in the deck. Right now, I only have one because I ran out of rare wild cards to craft, so I will be adding that second copy as soon as I crack a couple more packs. But right now, this is the current build of Red Deck Wins. There are ways that you can make this a little bit more budget-friendly, because, again, right now the deck is $78, which, in the grand scheme of a standard deck, is not bad. The fact that it costs the same as a Shield Red is pretty darn good in my book. But if you want to cut it down and make it a little cheaper, Shivan Devastator is sitting at $4.99 a copy right now. Playing a couple Bloodfeather Phoenixes gets the similar effect. It doesn't have haste, but it's a 2/2 flyer that has recursion, so that could be very useful for you. For Chandra sitting at about $11 right now a card. So this is by far the most expensive card in the format, where it's about $22 in this deck. So one thing that you could do, and this is something I've been playing around with for the sideboard that probably will make its way in, I just have to figure out what to cut, is Jaya from Dominaria United. Jaya has 4 abilities, and the one that I'm looking forward to the most is the +1 that creates a 1/1 monk creature token with prowess. So it kind of creates a little brother to Swiftspear. So it gives you a little bit more board presence, but you could use Jaya. I like Chandra for the damage, but Jaya you could definitely throw in there, especially if your meta tends to want to go wide. Play with Fire, again, it's Shock on steroids, which means that it's about $2 a pop right now. So you can definitely kind of slim that down. You could add in, Flame Blast Bolt doesn't go to your opponent, but it deals with creatures. Plus, it has the ability to exile them if they die this turn. So it allows you a little bit more permanent removal, especially with Reanimator running around. But, this card could be swapped out, and it'll be really cool to see what comes up in the fall set. Maybe we'll actually get Shock back, and that will be a decent replacement. Without the Scry, it's, not quite as good, but then again, like I said, this is Shock on steroids. Brotherhood End, I've tried to replace Brotherhood End. I really don't think that there is any single card that does what this card can do. Again, we've got the Older Dragon War Saga, which does 2, so that's not too bad. End of Festivities is 1 red, which deals 1 damage across the board. So if you're not concerned about the amount of damage that you need to do, or 1 damage will be enough for your meta, you could play that. But being able to have a modal spell that takes out both artifacts and creatures is not often seen. So Brotherhood End is sitting at about $5 to $6 a pop. Really, I think that card is hard to replace. If you do want to replace it, you could look at stuff like Smash the Dust. Isn't too bad. It doesn't do a whole board, but it does. It does incidental. Allows you to pick and choose. So you might want to go that route. But really, I think it's Brotherhood End is one of those cards that I think needs to stay. So in the end, you could probably get a budget version built for around $30 to $35. You could go a little bit lower than that. Again, there have been decks that are doing that. And again, MTGGoldfish and Saffron Olive have a lot of really cheap builds that are just ripping it up, and their videos are incredibly cool. So if you want a deck that is cheaper than $30, go take a look at their builds. They use a lot of really cool cards like Phoenix Chick and Reinforced Ronin. Though the decks are just, again, I can't say enough about them. I think that they're amazing builds. So go take a look at those if you're looking for kind of what Saffron Olive calls the ultra budget decks. So this is my deck. This is my interpretation of red deck wins. Next, let's go take a look at some gameplay, and then we can catch up at the end and review the performance and have some closing thoughts. So good luck. Okay, so now we're getting ready for round one. The way this is going to work is it's going to be more of a reaction. I'm going to be kind of talking about my thought process and what I was thinking about as this. So let's take a look at the opening hand. Looks pretty decent. Got a decent turn 2 play. I love Bloodthirsty Adversary, so we got plenty of removal. We've got a Chandra for turn 3, 2 mana on the draw. So let's get ready to go. So here we are waiting for our opponent. Draw a third land, which great because means we can play Chandra on turn 3 on curve. So our opponent plays nothing, which is great because now we can pop out a second land, play the adversary, and go in for 2. So this matchup is pretty interesting. I'm still trying to figure out what my opponent's on. I honestly have just started playing Standard within the last couple months, so I'm still trying to get a hold of the meta. So, yep, I'm kind of trying to debate what I want to do. I definitely want to clear out the path in front of me, so send that thing to the graveyard, and here we go. And now we have trying to figure out what we want to do next, kind of looking at all of my options. And it looks like, just kind of waiting for our opponent to take their next move. So by this point, it's obvious that they're on some sort of what I'd imagine be Selesnya or Naya build. So I'm not necessarily too worried about that. Trying to decide what card to play next. I'm, still getting a handle of this deck. I've just made some changes to it, so still trying to figure out what all the cards look like. So best option is right now to, just round out as much as possible. By this point, I figured out that I'm playing against Naya, so definitely want a board presence. I figured my opponent would make the trade, which was smart on their point, especially if you're playing against red deck wins. You want to clear out their board as fast as physically possible. So, yep, definitely going for kill spell. So my opponent's life total is getting lower and lower, and so now I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. The smart play on this one, honestly, probably would have been the run out Chandra and then +1. Gets me a little bit more mana. But in this regard, the Flame Breather works well. I probably sequenced that wrong. Definitely should have done it in reverse order, but, or even potentially kind of drawn the extra card to see what I would have gotten. But, the beats keep on coming. Holding on to a nice Rending Flame in hand, so I'm ready for whatever they play. And I draw a Lightning Strike, so I'm feeling pretty good at this point, holding 2 really nice burn spells in hand. I spin the wheel to figure out what else I can get. So I've got a Squee, I've got Lightning Strike. I'm trying to determine what I want to play, and I end up casting the Lightning Strike to clear it out of the way. Now playing Squee. Always play that at last minute so you don't necessarily tip them off. Especially if they're playing blue and they might have a counter spell. Definitely want to draw that out with the Lightning Strike first. Although the cool thing about Squee is that if it gets countered, it goes to the graveyard so you can still recur it. They play a, I believe that's a battle at this point. But at this point, they're pretty dead. In fact, I'm about to do the Chandra play on this one, I believe. Yep, so I ping them down. I and I'm playing the next Chandra. I know that I have to legend rule it, but deals 1. And yep, they realize the writing's on the wall, so they go ahead and scoop. So that is a pretty decent first game victory with the deck. And now we are just moving on into game number 2. So good luck to our opponent. There are a lot of really cool avatars in Arena right now. Here we have this is my favorite play. Again, Kumeno going into a nice turn 2. Plenty of removal. I've got options for my turn 2 as well. This is just, perfect. So let's go ahead. And of course, I always forget that I play first in this situation because I rarely get to play first. Arena Coin Flipper really does not like me. So, of course, let's go ahead and start with the beats. So right now, it's ticked up. So I'm looking at my options. Let's go ahead and drop that mountain. And go ahead with there's the advocate, and let's swing for 3. Our opponent has some card advantage, but we've got the advantage in terms of like the sheer board presence because another Kumeno off the top. I am just thrilled at this point. I've got a next turn play with a 2-drop, so let's bring it in, take a hit for 5. Opponent is building a lot of hand presence, but not playing a lot of lands. So, yeah, they seem to have some stuff stuck in their hand. Not necessarily the greatest thing for them. So, it ticks up. At this point, I could probably use a couple more lands just so I could start playing multiple spells per turn. But yeah, doesn't matter. They go ahead and concede. I think they realized the writing was on the wall. They weren't drawing what they needed to. They figured, especially in the era of arena ladders, got to go ahead. So now we moved into game number 3. Not sitting with the greatest hand right now. I mean, 2 burn spells and a turn 2 play. 3 mana is, I kind of want to start with 2 because then I can draw into the 3rd. This, not a lot of spells in hand, but it's passable. It's most certainly keepable. I get to go first in this match, so I would probably keep this hand if I was on the draw. I mulligan it because I want a different hand. Here we can see that there are some, way different sets of cards that are going to give me something else. So I throw back a Chandra, figuring, it's not the most necessary. So play out, spell, hold up, play with fire. So here we are, they entered with a tap land, which is great for me. Gotta love that first turn tap land. It basically leaves you free to do whatever you want without fear of repercussions. So building a Born Presence. I've got multiple Flame Breathers, which is great for the late game, in terms of being able to pop your opponent, but I kind of want a little bit of damage on the board now, so I'm kind of muse what I need to do next. I want to hold up the play with fire as I'm debating playing them, but I realize that is removal, so I'm just going to hold on to it, play that out, hold up a play with fire, so if they play something, I can go ahead and, hit them for 2, so essentially a shock. Allows me to get a couple extra damage in. So they're still not playing anything. And at this point, I realize they're on Rakdos, so I'm just fearing for the inevitable Shield Red that I'm expecting is probably coming at some point in the future. So at this moment, I realize I just got to race. Yep, so I did 3 there off of that Saga, so that was pretty good. And another 2, again, playing against a deck that's got some life gain in it that's coming. This moment in time, it's it's a race. I got to get them to 0 before they start gaining life. I'm counting in my hand. I've got 4 damage in hand plus 2, so I've got 6 effective damage sitting that can go straight to the dome. Play a Chandra, that's going to trigger a Fire Breather, so do 2 more. It's not a creature, so I don't profit off the Saga, but I'm okay with that because, I just gotta. I'm just looking for damage. Knowing that I'll have that 2/2 next turn is really nice. I did leave myself with shields down, so I was hoping that wouldn't come back to bite me. They're digging for something, and at this moment I am terrified that they are looking for some life gain. They're looking for, some of the big baddies that we expect coming out of this deck. So yeah, we are still trying to factor out what is potentially coming next. So, yep, they wiped the board, so, I'm thinking, oh crap, I'm lucky that we've got the shaman that came out. So I'm trying to figure out how much damage can I do, knowing that my pingers are off the board. I've got 5 damage. I'm showing 5, 7 damage, 8 damage with the Epicure, so, I'm just hoping to pull out something. And yeah, I think that they felt that they weren't going to win this race, so they went ahead and conceded. That was pretty good. So now we go ahead and move into game number 4, I believe. Yeah, this hand was pretty good. I mean, no hasty attacker, but an Epicure and 2 Sagas means I've got at least 3 points of damage sitting in hand, so let's go ahead and, yeah, get ready to play that. I'm trying to decide, I guess, which Saga to play first, which is kind of silly, but I've got a Lightning Strike in hand as well. So, yeah, I am feeling pretty confident in this ability. My opponent goes first. Go ahead, draw, and play out the land. Go Saga. Take 1, please and thank you. And yeah, they go ahead and concede. I guess they didn't like their hand. I, at this moment, was flipping out. Like, no, I never concede that early. Going into this game, potentially we have a deck that is going to last longer. I mean, it can't possibly end quicker than, oh, nope, turn 2. Yep, they didn't like what they saw. So, yep, that's a 5-0 start. Now, here is where I went and played another set of 5 because I thought that we had some really quick concessions. So let's go ahead and look at this, the first of the second 5. Now, this hand, also very good. Sitting with 3 mana, so, I would probably, again, like 1 more spell, but, it's a risky hand, I think, with this one. I really do think you want to start with 2 mana in hand and a clutch of spells. But, this 4 can work in a pinch. I decided to throw it back because I want a little bit more flexibility. This hand is a little bit better, sitting with plenty of burn, and Monastery Swift Spear, which is something I really enjoy. So trying to figure out what to throw back. Decide that I really want the Swift Spear on turn 1 and the Adversary on turn 2, because that gives me, that should have them at 16, assuming they don't throw out much to block. So I don't know what they're on. This set of 5, we played a lot of what I believe to be Naya ramps, so real interesting deck builds. So let's go ahead and, punch him for 3. So I'm holding up 2 burn spells, which is excellent, so I can take up pretty much whatever they put in front of me. So play out another next land, and yep, in this case, yeah, play with fire. No need for overkill. Save the 3 damage spells for a 3 damage creature. And this triggers prowess, so I'm swinging for 4 now. Red deck is putting down the beats. Yep. So, moving into this, Again, opponent laying out some blockers. I've got a burn spell in response. My opponent's probably getting very sick of those burn spells, but red deck life. Yep. And for those that were wondering, yeah, I played it on their turn. I want to keep my mana open in case I drew something big. I knew the prowess trigger went to waste, but it's wanting to use your mana efficiently every turn. So here, yeah, they just keep putting out creatures. They're doing anything to try to get something in front of me. So here, once again, contemplating what I want to do in terms of the burn. I decide not to burn it this turn. I want to see what I can draw. I decide to play out the burn spell because I just need to get the blocker out of the way at this point. Still wanting to keep them out. Kind of holding back. Kind of looking at and trying to do some damage calcs in my head. That Raiju is looking real tempting. Yep. Actually, at this moment, I decide I'm trying to do damage calc is what I'm trying to do, and I don't like roping like this. I think that, it's kind of like playing the time in chess, but it's necessary. Magic is a game of thought. I end up playing the burn spell. They end up drawing cards. They're digging, and that's the nice thing about this format is there's lots of ways to dig. So they go in, they take 4 more, they're getting real low on life, and it's, they've got to put out something because next turn I'm getting ready to kind of go off with this. I've got a really nice spell, and they put out some blockers, so now I've got options. Do I want Squee or the Raiju? Definitely a tough choice. It's not a nice choice to have. In this case, got to play Squee because, again, it makes the goblins, so it is giving me plenty of board presence. And now the question for them is, how do they want to block optimally? They make the right choice here, taking out the Swift Spear and the Goblin token. So they're trying to minimize their damage. They're still trying to, they're clinging to anything. They don't know what I've got in hand. They don't know that their doom is incoming on this one. They need hand attack at this point. They just got to keep what's in my hand off the field. They don't know that, but that would be the kind of optimal play. So now we're just waiting. They're playing out more bodies. They realize that they've got to have something in front of me. So, yeah, they're trying to build board presence, and they're doing a pretty darn good job of it. So they built up a decent board. I find my absolute favorite. Play out Kumeno, hit him for 1, and that does the job. Don't even need to worry about attacking. I would have had the Raiju, so I could have done that extra point of damage anyway. So we're going to move on to the game number 2 in the second set of things. Good luck to our opponent. This hand has burn. It's got creatures. It's got a nice curve. Knowing that we have a 4-drop with 2 mana, we're hoping to draw into it. With this deck, it usually gets that 4 mana spell down by turn 5 or 6. So it's this is unlike most red decks. It's got a little bit of lasting power. It's got some staying power in it. So we're just hoping to keep the beats going for as long as possible. That card, again, one of my favorite cards to play on turn 2 because eventually I'm going to try to flip it over. So kind of like teeing off with a driver. We got an Epicure for 1 right off the gate. If my opponent can start their turn with 19 life, I'm pretty happy with that. In fact, my deck has enough damage on 1 that usually is where their life total will start. So no blockers. Well, this is one of the rare times where the Epicure gets in for 1, so go little buddy. Not the Epicure. It's weird considering thinking of them as a buddy. But in this case, anything that chips them down by 1 is definitely welcome to be my buddy. And I draw my Kumeno, which got to play that out because I've got some really cool turn 2 next turn spells to play. Here's the problem. I haven't drawn any mana, so I'm sitting on that Raiju thinking, wow, I just need to draw some lands in order to play that out. So definitely something I'm looking to possibly do. I'm attacking in, trying to see if they're willing to throw the blocker under the bus on this one. Are they willing to? TikTok opponent. Yep, they're willing to trade with the Epicure. That's fine. He served his purpose. So, I'm building a board presence next turn. Whatever creature I'm playing is getting pumped. So, they've got to be thinking he's a red deck with cards. It's always a danger. Here you can see that I am sacking the blood token. I'm digging for that land and I find one. Plus I draw a Monastery Swiftspear, so this means I get to play a couple creatures out this turn. So that gets the +1 counter, so that is a favorite play of mine. So now he's a 2/3 with prowess, which is actually phenomenal. So let's go ahead and let's punch in. Life total is going down. You'll notice in this game, in a lot of these games, it's pretty close to flawless victories. Like, not taking any damage is really nice when it comes to, the speed at which you move and the fact that, you're creating this, this board control. They're playing ramp spells, so yeah, Battle for Zendikar is a great ramp card to go in Naya. And now we just have, at this moment, we just have a board presence. Yeah, we've got the mana, so we're playing out our spells, and our opponent realizes that they are toast, so they go ahead and concede. So, don't really blame them for that. I would have done the same. So, now we're going ahead and moving into game number 4 on this one. Let's go ahead and see what we've got. And this hand, it's not bad. It's pretty close to perfect. I've got my favorite turn 1, turn 2 combo with some follow-ups and 3 mana and a card to play on 3 with Chandra. So I've got my curve. So let's go ahead and see what we can get going. So now we've got to see what our opponent is on. So I mistakenly think that they're on Izzet, and when I should have realized, oh, red and blue are part of Grixis. So they are on Grixis at this moment, which, again, the minute I realize that, I'm like, okay, yeah, got to go fast now. Like, this is, you got to turn into Sonic on this one, because unless you draw that Rending Flame, you've got to be thinking something big and bad is coming down on, like, the 5 through 7 drop era. Yep, here's actually where when I saw that they had the blue-black land, I realized, oh, Grixis, fun. So trying to figure out what to do. I'm trying to figure out whether I should burn out their creature with the Rending Flame, because I know that I need to keep it, and I decide, it's better to play out Chandra and to hold back Rending Flame for a little bit. So I'm going in, trying to see if I can offer up a trade. And they decide that, yeah, we'll take the trade. That's fair. For me, it's anything that can keep the board clear. Again, they play another one, so the board just keeps getting a little bit thicker. Now with Chandra, I know that I've got some scary things coming in the future, so I'm going for card draw. I just need to figure out, I need to get something. I'm looking for, honestly, like a quick little burn spell in order to clear out the blocker, and I find it, so the deck does yield. Plus, I trigger Prowess, and my opponents had enough, they go ahead and straight up concede. So, not bad at all. Now we move into the next game. Actually, I think on that last game, yeah, I was off. That was game 3, so here's game 4 coming up. I was off on my count. So, yeah, I mean, not a bad hand. It's a little heavy, so I go ahead and mull it. Here I see, I really don't like bowling too far with this. I kind of like what I see. It's got, it's got my favorite turn 1, turn 2 plays ready to go. So um, I think that this is going to be a straight up keep on this part. So, yep, we throw back the card draw. So I really like this art. If I could find this on a playmat, I would be very happy, but alas, I don't have one. Although the Jin Gataxias ink print from Ultra Pro is really nice. They're not a sponsor, but I really do like that playmat, so I have that on order. So, yay, turn 1 play. Why'd I say not a sponsor? I don't have any followers. I don't need sponsors. Okay, so yeah, nice little turn 2 play here, and it flips. So we've got a nice little board presence now. So just the red deck is just this is what the red deck is accused of, is that it gets accused of being very linear. I think it's way more dynamic than that. It's kind of like how I used to accuse Tron players of being very linear, when actually there's a lot of different choices that need to be made. With Burn, it really does teach you the art and the essence of sequencing, especially when you're playing this many prowess creatures. So just trying to hold my opponent back for a little bit. I'm looking at the blood token. They're playing Jace, so I'm wondering, are they playing some version of Mill? I mean, I have a blue Mill deck, which does pretty decent in Standard right now. But yeah, they shrank my creature. Don't really know what that did. I think they were just trying to go for the plus, but they could have also milled me. I don't know, to be honest. I don't know what they were thinking. Which, as this match goes on, I don't know what they necessarily are thinking. If they are going for mill, one thing that they've got to look out for is the fact that red deck just beats them up front, as long as we, because our deck is entirely gas. Again, on this play, definitely swinging for them, not Jace. I don't care what Jace is doing. I've got creatures on the board. I don't care what they're doing. I'll probably beat them before their plan will come to fruition if it is mill. So I've got blockers. I've got 4 creatures on the board with more sitting in my hand. They can remove a couple, but I'm still doing a lot to keep them back. And yep, their nightmare is about to happen. Play down the Raiju, and yep, get this swing for the hills. Yep, trying to determine what I'm putting it on. It doesn't really matter. I don't know why it took me that long to think. So swing in, and that is another game win. So in game 4, moving into game 5 now. So again, a lot of really cool avatars. Very cool. This hand, 1 mana is a little scary, although you've got the turn 1 through turn 4 plays with removal up. It's, as long as you draw a land, it's looking pretty optimal, so we're going to keep that. This is greedy, but it's also very rich and flavorful. It's like eating a steak. Sometimes sometimes you know that you've got to go with it. So, yeah, I mean, on the plus side, I've got a turn 1 through turn 4 play, and if I draw another land, I can hold up burn as well, so I'm trying to decide which Swift Spear to play. Doesn't really matter. Draw the land, so I am sitting high and fine at this moment. So now I have a 2/3 with prowess. So, go ahead and take 2, opponent. Yep, I am living the dream right now. this was one where I should have played that before sequencing error. This is the match where I was incredibly tired because it was like 1:30 in the morning, and I was like, you know what? Let's go ahead and just play this out. Let's not record the 10th game in the morning. So, yep. Now I get a 2/2 attacker, and I get the pump. I was dancing with the land there again. Very sleepy. Swing in. So, yep, now they're starting to play a board presence, and now I'm getting, kind of worried, especially now that I realize that they're mono black. So I realize that, yeah, we're looking down, probably seeing a shield red, which we will see a shield red here, which is one of the few times that we saw that get played. So, I played this, and I thought it was a Flame Breather, but it was a Reckless Impulse. I just looked at card art, and again, sleepy. So I drew cards, which isn't a bad thing, but it wasn't what I was expecting to do. So I play my land, and, it worked out for me, but I'm still trying to figure out how to recover from that misplay. Yep, that was the card I wanted to play. So, yep. So, attacking in, gonna see what they do. Actually, I decided to hold back, it looks like. Yep, and here is Shield Red. Hi, Shield Red. Fancy meeting you here. But, yeah, I know that creature has to die with fire. So I'm looking at my options, and I realize I do have options. And I believe, let's see, on the draw here, Shield Red, yeah, sure. I go down to 2. I'm trying desperately to play my burn spell. I want to, I can't play it fast enough. Yep, without even thinking, I just snap that off. It's, I want that thing gone. Burn the bug. So Shield Red's out of the way. Card's still in exile. It's going to fade away. But you know what? This moment in time, I got rid of a Shield Red. I am perfectly happy with that. I'm okay with that. So, yeah. They choose to block. Are they? Yep. They're just trying to figure out which thing to block. So, I'm going to shoot that down. And, yep, it's going to be a trade in the end for that. So, and since I did it before combat, I got the prowess trigger off the Swift Spear, so that was nice. So I've got a board presence. In one turn, I managed to clean them out, so I was pretty happy with that. I'm also sitting empty-handed, so not necessarily the happiest about that. They are sitting at a dangerously low life total, so I am hoping that I can get in for the next couple points. I'm hoping that they don't have another Shield Red, is what I'm hoping. And I know I mentioned Shield Red a lot in this. However, I think it's important to know that Shield Red is kind of the boogeyman in this format right now. Yeah, they're just taking... I'm starting to lose faith in my ability to win now that they're starting to chip down my board presence. But the Epicure, again, does help. So going ahead and just attacking in. I've got a blood token, but have no cards to discard to it, so I am really just hoping that I can go ahead and draw something, either that I can pitch away or, get rid of. So here we go ahead and, yep, the Despair card is absolutely one of the, is definitely invokes Despair, like the name says. We pitch that away, and we draw the burn spell. Yep, essentially a burn spell. It is 1 damage. So they were at 3, they take 1, they take 2. They realize on the attack that, yeah, I've got him, so we beat the mono black deck. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. So we finished our 10 games, and the deck finished an impressive 10-0. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say that I think part of that is the construction of the deck. I think it's a very solid build, but I don't think it's necessarily indicative of what you're going to see if you were to play this. In fact, I could play this 10 more times, and then 10 more times after that, and then 10 more times after that. And you know what? I'm probably going to. This is probably the deck I'm going to be taking to Gen Con in August, and I really like the deck. But I'm guaranteeing you, I don't think I'm going to go 10-0, even one or two more times until then. And the primary reason is I think that we hit a weird spot in our deck draws. We only hit a couple of the Rakdos or Grixis mid-range decks that play Shield Red and Fable. Those are probably our toughest matchups because they just have so many big creatures and a lot more removal. I think that if we would have played more of them, we probably would have seen our win-loss rate go down. But overall, I'm happy. I think that some notes that I made throughout the gameplay is, one, I think we need to be very cautious about our sequencing, especially in that last game, which I will openly admit I played like trash. I was tired. It was 1 a.m, and I thought, well, I just need to record this 10th game. Let's not wait till the morning. Let's just do it now so I can go video editing come daybreak. And as I've learned, you don't do things sleepy. So I made some misplays, and I was lucky to win that game. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the things that you have to watch for. Always remember Monastery of Swift Spears before your burn spells, especially if you got the mana. There were a couple times where I was holding up Lightning Strike and Monastery Swift Spear, and I played Lightning Strike first instead of playing the Swift Spear. Big mistake, missed the Prowess trigger. Making sure that when you play Reckless Impulse and you have the option for playing Lightning Strike, which one do you need more at the time? If you've got 3 mana and you're hoping to draw that mountain, is it a gamble that you're willing to roll? Also remembering that that if you're playing Kumeno, do you have a second turn play, or do you have a play for the turn after? You really don't want to let the +1/+1 counter go away if you don't have to, so do you have a play after that? Remembering to, what do you need to have in your yard to recur Squee? Do you have something that you can recur? Squee and Bloodthirsty Adversary are kind of, non-bows. Again, it's not often you get to use both of these, but also remember that if you're taking cards out because of Bloodthirsty Adversary, that it's less for Squee to recur on. Primarily reason that we play only one Squee. Also remembering that, again with Chandra, there's a couple times where I was +1 in Chandra to draw a land, and remembering I couldn't draw a land. So just remembering little things like that. What would I change with this deck? As I talked about at the beginning, potentially adding in Jaya instead of Chandra. I think that the reach could go well, especially if tokens becomes more prevalent. One thing that I think we need to note is that we are just days away from the next banning list that is coming out on May 29th, and whether or not we think it's going to happen, I think the majority of the community is hoping that at least some parts of the Rakdos and Grixis mid-range decks are banned, whether that be Invoke Despair, whether that be Shield Red, whether that be Fable the Mirror. We're hoping something goes. So if something does go, I think we can tone down the number of Rending Flames because there aren't that many big threats that will be wandering around. We can potentially increase to more Stoke the Flames because 4 damage going straight to your opponent is probably more valuable at that moment. We can put in more of the Siege of Regatha because that goes to your opponent as well. I think then more of the creature-based decks like the Go Wide Azorius Tokens deck, Azorius Knights deck, or maybe more of the Naya ramp decks that either go big creatures, like real big creatures, or they put out a lot of creatures, like a lot of tokens. I think Incubate could become more popular at that point. I think a lot of creatures that are tiny with the toxic mechanic, I think, are going to become popular at that point. So at that point, having Jaya just cranking out additional bodies per turn is going to be very useful. So I think Jaya is a good option, and the fact that Jaya is sitting around 50 cents, maybe 75 cents right now, I think is a cost-effective way of replacing Chandra. So that is something to look at. A couple things that I would also maybe add in is potentially swapping out, pick your favorite card. Maybe you want to go down on some of the two drops, or maybe you want to cut down on the number of, maybe you want to cut a squee. For calling a professional, I did play an 11th game on the morning after, just to say, what kind of things are running around out here. Is there anything fun that I'm playing? I wanted to play a game before I started video editing is basically it. I didn't record it, but I ended up losing to a life gain deck. And in that game, they probably gained back 9 life. They ended up finishing it too. So I was chipping them down, 9 extra life over the course of the game. And had it not been for life gain, they would have been DOA. So, maybe a call on a professional, especially if life gain becomes more prevalent, being able to blow out their life gain really, really sets them back, and it kind of catches them on the wrong foot. So that might be something I sub in. Depending on how bad I don't want Reanimator to go off against me, potentially putting in some Flame Blessed Bolts instead of Play with Fires. I think that would be a good way to make sure that creatures that you send to the graveyard stay in the graveyard, or at least stay dead, so to speak. So, outside of that, I know some builds play Thermal Alchemist. I think that basically does what Flame Breather does, except without tapping. So I kind of like Flame Breather. I think Thermal Alchemist has a little bit more in terms of like defensive value versus the Flame Breather. So it's kind of 6 of one and half dozen of another. I think that there's like was it Nahiri's Warcrafting? I think is also a decent card draw spell that could replace Reckless Impulse. Both have their advantages in different situations, so I think that could easily be done. And again, depending on what your meta is, Brotherhood's War could easily be subbed in. If you find yourself at your LGS with facing down a lot of vehicles decks, or Unlicensed Hearst, or other things that are running around, especially since Neon Dynasty will be sticking with us for another 18 months. If you're playing a lot against mech decks, definitely Brotherhood War is something that you want to be subbing in. So a lot of things like that. You've also got, if you want to play Urabrask, which is a card that I've also looked at. I think Urabrask is a super fun card, but I also think that it has a little bit more in terms of limitations. Flipping it is kind of like trying to play Arclight Phoenix in Modern or Pioneer, where it basically requires you to go off. So I think, if you're going to go that way out, definitely having more 1-mana burn spells like End of Festivities and Flame Blessed Bolt. So you might want to be running, 3 or 4 copies of Flame Blessed Bolt and End of Festivities and, the Play with Fires, just so that you can go off in a turn and flip it. Because I'll give you this, when Urabrask flips, it is pretty darn impressive. But outside of that, I've tried playing Urabrask in lieu of the Thundering Raiju. I just like the fact that it has the ability to, send damage at my opponent that can't be interrupted. So this is the build. Again, it's sitting at about $78. It is not too horribly expensive. You can, again, cut it down to probably about $30 with this build. And if you're looking for builds that go ultra budget that can still win rounds, there are a lot of content creators like Saffron Olive and MTGGoldfish that have amazing deck techs on ultra budget burn decks and red deck wins that do an amazing job. There's a lot of other content creators that have other red deck wins out there that also do very well. This is, again, just my interpretation. So have fun, sleeve up, and we'll see you next time.